He rejected her before he knew what he was losing. Not with words meant for her. Worse, with another woman's hand in his before the whole court, while the nobles smiled as if her humiliation were part of the evening's entertainment. Leora stood at the edge of the great hall, a silver wine tray steady in her hands, and understood, with a cold so sharp it felt clean, that if King Cailan ever truly saw her, he would destroy her without even meaning to, because loving him had always been dangerous. Chapter 1. He chose another woman where everyone could see. The court applauded the match, and the sound of it went through her so cleanly it felt like her bones had opened for it. If he ever truly saw what she was, she would lose him. She had believed that for years it turned out she could lose him without that truth ever leaving her throat. The great hall gleamed beneath winter torchlight. Gold bled over marble, silk whispered, nobles smiled behind jeweled cups. Above them all, beneath the carved wolves of the royal crest, Alpha King Cailan stood beside Lady Seraphine Valadorn, whose hand rested lightly on his arm like victory already belonged to her. Leora lowered her eyes before he could catch her looking. Too late. She felt his gaze anyway. That was the curse of him. Even when he said nothing, even when the room was full, even when another woman stood within reach of his hand, he could still make it feel as though attention itself had teeth. "Raise the cups," Lord Marrow called smoothly from the foot of the dais. "To the future queen." The room obeyed. Leora did too. Cailan did not. It was a small thing, almost invisible. His cup remained at his side while everyone else drank. Only someone who had spent years learning the shape of his restraint would have noticed. Leora noticed everything about him. She hated that even now. Seraphine turned her head slightly. "Your Majesty?" Cailan's voice carried low and cold. "There will be no formal announcement tonight." The court stilled. The silence after that was alive. Seraphine's hand tightened on his arm. "You had agreed." "I agreed to discussion, not declaration." Embarrassment moved across her face so quickly it almost did not exist. Almost. Then she smiled, and that was worse. Below the dais, Leora kept breathing. Only that. Only that. She would not look up again. She would not give the court her face on the same night it had found something new to enjoy. "You seem distracted, my king," Seraphine said softly, and softness was always the crueler choice. "By whom?" Her gaze followed his, straight to Leora. Heat climbed Leora's neck. She stepped back at once, but court attention was a pack instinct once roused. Heads turned, fans lowered, conversations died. Lord Marrow's pale eyes sharpened. Ah, there it was, the servant, the palace ghost, the quiet girl with no family name and no wolf scent worth respecting, the one the king kept too near and explained too little. Seraphine descended the dais with gracious slowness. She did not hurry. Women like her never had to hurry toward humiliation. It waited for them. She stopped before Leora and let her gaze travel from the servant's dark dress to the silver tray to the hands that were just beginning to shake. "Lift your head," Seraphine said. Leora bowed lower instead. "My lady," Seraphine reached out and caught her chin. "I said lift your head." The tray slipped. Silver shattered across the marble. The sound rang through the hall like a struck nerve. Gasps followed. Cailan moved. Leora saw him in the edge of her vision. One step down from the dais before he forced himself still. Seraphine smiled as if she had been given a gift. "There you are." Her thumb pressed lightly against Leora's jaw. "The little creature he notices." Leora said nothing. "Speak." "Yes, my lady." "Look at all of this trembling," Seraphine said to the room. "I almost pity you." Leora met her eyes then. It was a mistake. Pride always was. "I would keep that emotion for yourself," she said quietly. The nearest nobles stiffened. Seraphine's face cooled. "A servant with opinions. A servant with ears," Leora said. That tends to produce them. A few men hid smiles behind their cups. That made Seraphine crueler at once. You forget your place. No, Leora said. I survive it. Kaelin came down the dais. His voice reached them before he did. Enough! Seraphine turned without releasing Leora's chin. Is it? I find the evening clearer now. Kaelin stopped in front of them. His eyes flicked once to Leora's face, once to Seraphine's hand. Let her go. The order should have ended it. It did not. Seraphine's fingers fell away, but Lord Marrow stepped forward wearing the expression of a man who had smelled opportunity in blood. Your Majesty, he said, the court does not dislike mystery when it serves the throne. It dislikes it more when it serves a servant. Kaelin looked at him with a kind of calm that made generals step back. Choose your next words with care. Marrow bowed just enough to insult. Then let me choose caution. The girl has lived within your palace for years, close enough to attract notice and yet without lineage, wolf or pack bond. That alone invites rumor. I was not aware, Kaelin said, that my household answered to rumor. It answers to safety. Leora went still. Lord Marrow reached inside his sleeve and withdrew a slim glass vial. Blue liquid caught the torchlight. Her blood froze. Forced shift draft. Weak against most. Ruinous against someone suppressing a form for years. Kaelin saw her face change. What is that? A test, Marrow said. If your little servant is truly wolfless, nothing will happen. Leora's pulse pounded so hard she felt it in her teeth. Kaelin's voice lowered. No. Marrow ignored him. If she is not what she claims, then perhaps the court deserves to know what has been hidden beneath your roof. Two guards moved. Leora stepped back. Kaelin stepped between them before anyone could breathe. The room felt his anger like weather. Touch her, he said, and I will decorate this hall with your bones. The guards halted. Marrow looked at Leora, not at the king. Interesting. The whole room understood what his smile meant. Interesting was more dangerous than accusation. Accusation could be denied. Interesting made nobles hungry. Leora should have run then, but Kaelin was in front of her. That was the worst part. If she fled now, it would look like guilt. If she stayed, she might still survive the lie. If she panicked, he would know. If he knew, if he sees what I am, I lose him. That thought had held her life together for 8 years. Kaelin did not look away from Marrow. Leave the hall. Nobody moved. Seraphine laughed softly. Why defend her so fiercely if there is nothing to hide? He turned on her with enough force in his gaze to strip the sound from her face. Careful, but the court had already scented scandal. There was no putting it down now. One of the guards moved too quickly, another too close. The vial flashed in torchlight. Leora turned. Fingers bit into her wrist, a hand shoved hard against her shoulder. The glass mouth jammed between her lips. Bitter fire hit her tongue. Kaelin roared. The hall shook with it, windows trembled, torches guttered, wolves dropped their eyes on instinct. But the liquid had already gone down. Leora fell to one knee. Pain exploded beneath her skin. Not a natural shift, not the old slow agony of bones learning a larger truth. This was theft, dragged open, torn wide. Someone shouted for chains, someone else for silver. Leora heard none of it clearly. The world narrowed to her body, betraying her in public, and Kaelin's voice somewhere inside the chaos saying her name like it could still save her. It couldn't. The first crack tore through her spine. The court screamed. Chapter 2. The first thing to emerge was not fur. It was a scaled tail, silver-black and violent, lashing across the marble hard enough to split stone, then claws. Then the arch of a body too large to belong to any known wolf. Leora rose out of the ruin of her own shape on 4 limbs made for killing, her mane pale at the throat like moonlight dragged through blood. Her eyes burned silver. Her breath came like smoke in winter. The hall recoiled. No one said wolfless now. Nobles stumbled. Guards drew steel with shaking hands. One lady fainted outright. Seraphine's face emptied of everything but horror. Lord Marrow actually stepped back. Leora did not care. She looked for Kaelin. He stood 6 feet away with his hands open and his entire body locked. Shock had gone through him and come out the other side as something more dangerous. He was not looking at her like a monster. He was looking at her like a wound he had failed to prevent. "Leora," he said. Archers rose onto the upper galleries. "Kill it!" someone screamed. 3 guards lunged. She moved on instinct. One sweep of her forelimbs sent 2 men crashing into a row of chairs. Her tail struck the third hard enough to knock his sword free. She had not meant to use that much force. Her body had no memory of restraint in this shape. Only the old wild law of survive first. The court heard the violence and forgot she had once poured their wine. Kaelin stepped forward instead of back. "No one fires." They hesitated. "Did you not hear me?" His voice cracked through the hall. "No one fires." Lord Marrow found his courage behind other men's weapons. "Your Majesty, that creature has been deceiving your house." "Creature?" Kaelin turned his head. If anger had a physical shape, it was what entered his face then. "She," he said, each word sharpened on contempt, "has survived your stupidity for years. Do not mistake that for deception." The room changed. Not enough, but enough for Leora to feel it. He was choosing language. In court, that was blood. Kaelin looked back at her and lowered his voice. "Shift back if you can. If you can. Not do it, not obey." The kindness of that nearly shattered what remained of her control. The forced draft was weakening. She felt it in the drag beneath her rib. But shifting back under witnesses meant becoming naked in front of a room that had just screamed for her death. Her body trembled. Kaelin saw. He stripped off his cloak and held it where she could see it. "Look at me." She did. "Shift back," he said again, softer now. "I've got you." The words struck harder than any chain could have. She forced herself down. The return hurt worse. By the time it was over, she was on her knees, breath torn, hair falling over her face, palms bloodied from where claws had scored the marble. The hall stared at the bare line of her shoulder, the bruising at her throat where the guard had forced the vial into her mouth, the evidence that monsters could kneel and still look breakable. Kaelin was there before anyone else could move. He wrapped his cloak around her himself. The court watched their king kneel in front of a half-shifted woman they had just tried to kill. Leora shut her eyes. This was almost worse. Pity in public had always felt like a prettier kind of cruelty. Kaelin's hands tightened once at her shoulders, then eased. "Can you stand?" "Yes." It came out wrecked. He still heard it. "You don't have to." She looked up at him then, right through the ache. "I do if they're watching." His face changed. He understood that one. Not all of it, not the years, but that. He rose with her. The room held its breath. Seraphine found hers first. "You defend this?" Kaelin did not look at her. "You drugged a woman in my hall, a servant. That did it." He turned slowly. "Leave." Color drained from her face. "For her? For touching what was under my protection?" His eyes sharpened. "And because if you stay another moment, I may forget what audience requires." That was a threat. Everyone heard it. Seraphine swallowed. "She lied to you." Kaelin's answer came without hesitation. "So did half this room." Lord Marrow stepped in at once. "Your Majesty, the issue is not hurt feeling. It is law. No unknown beast can remain in the palace." Leora felt every eye cut back to her. Kaelin's voice went glacial. "Then the law will learn." He faced the court. "The hall is closed. Everyone leaves now." Some obeyed immediately. Others were slower. Those were nobles with poor instincts. Leora stood wrapped in the king's cloak, while the chamber emptied around her, and the whole kingdom learned exactly how dangerous a public humiliation became when the king refused to join in. When the last of them had gone except Marrow, Seraphine, and the inner guard, Kaelin looked at Marrow and said, "Your hand in this?" Marrow bowed. "My concern was the kingdom." "No," Kaelin said. Your concern was control. Leora lifted her head. The words hit Marrow harder than the threat had. That mattered. Kaelin knew where to strike. Marrow smiled faintly anyway. Then control is indeed slipping. The border packs will hear of this before dawn. Kaelin moved closer, until Marrow had to tilt his chin to maintain eye contact. Then pray they hear that I am already angry. He dismissed him with a look. Marrow left. Seraphine remained. That was a mistake. She looked at Leora with something uglier than fear now. Do you know what you've done? Leora met her gaze. Survived. You've made yourself impossible. No, Leora said. You did that when you tried to break me in public. Seraphine's mouth tightened. He will regret you. Kaelin's answer cut through the air like silver. Leave before I regret only that... Seraphine went. Silence fell at last. Only Kaelin, Leora, and the guard remained. He dismissed them too. When the doors closed, the great hall finally became too large. Leora swayed once. Kaelin caught her elbow. Gentle, immediate, unwanted. She pulled free. He let her. That almost undid her more than the touch would have. If you speak to me like I'm fragile, she said, I'll throw myself through your windows. Something like pain crossed his face. I wasn't going to speak. Good. He looked at the blood on the marble. The claws scored into stone, the wrecked chairs, the smear of blue glass and forced shift draft on the floor. Then he looked at her. Come with me, he said. She laughed once. Bitter. To where? A cell? The insult landed. He took it without defending himself. Somewhere the court cannot watch you breathe. That almost hurt worst of all. Because she wanted to go. Because even now his voice could still make safety sound like a trap she might choose herself. Chapter 3. He took her to the West Tower. No one came there without cause. It was where old records slept and where the palace forgot itself at night. Long before he was king, he had hidden books there to avoid tutors. Later he hid reports there to avoid counselors. Eventually he had hidden her there too, though they had never once spoken of it in those terms. The room at the top was narrow and circular, with one wide window looking over the winter forest. Kaelin lit no more than 2 candles. Mercy again. She hated needing him to think of it. Leora stood near the window, wrapped in his cloak, while her body remembered pain in waves. The forced shift had left bruised exhaustion in muscle and bone. Worse than the ache was the awareness of what had happened. The room, the stairs, the silence after, the way his voice had changed when he said no one would touch her. He closed the door behind him. Are you injured? No. It was a lie. He did not call it one. Would you tell me if you were... No. That, at least, was true. Kaelin moved closer, enough for candlelight to find the cut at his lip she had not noticed in the hall. Her beast must have caught him in the chaos. The sight of her mark on him made something dangerous move beneath her skin. He saw her looking. It's nothing, he said. Her laugh was short. You don't get to call blood nothing tonight. His gaze held hers. And you do? The question slid between them, too clean, too close to truth. Leora turned back to the window. Below, the palace grounds lay under moonlight. Beautiful. Still, as if the kingdom had not changed shape in a single night. Kaelin's voice lowered. How long? She knew what he meant. Too many answers existed. How long had she hidden? How long had she lied? How long had she loved him? How long had she expected this to destroy her? She chose the safest. Since I was 13. Silence behind her. Then, how old were you when you first shifted? 8. His breath left slowly. And no one taught you? My mother tried to burn me, Leora said. The candle flame snapped once in the draught. Kaelin did not speak. He had asked for truth. She had given him a piece sharp enough to draw blood. At last he said, Look at me. No, Leora, that voice. It carried command more softly than most men carried affection. It was the most dangerous thing about him. She turned because not turning felt like surrender too. He looked worse than he had in the hall. Tired, furious, held together by the work of not tearing the kingdom open with his bare hands. "Why didn't you tell me?" he asked. She smiled without warmth. "Which year?" He winced. "Good. There was always a reason not to," she said. "When I was 14, you were a prince with a habit of collecting lost things. When I was 17, you were heir, and the court already thought you weak where I was concerned. When you became king, telling you would have made me a liability at your throat." His jaw tightened. "You were never a liability." "No?" She stepped toward him. "Tonight they forced a shift draft down my throat to expose whatever I was to you. Explain what they thought they were doing if not reaching you through me." That landed. Kaelin did not hide the blow. "They'll pay for that." "There it is." She laughed again, lower this time. "Power. Men always find power easiest when the damage has already been done." Something flashed in his face then. Anger, yes, but not at her. "At me?" he asked quietly. "At all of you," she said. "At kings and lords and noblewomen, and every room full of people who smell weakness and decide it belongs to them." The silence after that was brutal. Kaelin stepped closer. "Not enough to trap, enough to refuse distance. You think I belong with them?" "I think," she said, because if she stopped now the rest would choke her, "that if you had ever wanted me for anything but pity, tonight would not have been the first time the court saw it." His face went utterly still. That was answer enough, and she hated herself for wanting more from the silence. "Leora, no." Her voice sharpened. "Do not soften now. I cannot bear your kindness when you arrive too late with it." He flinched. Actually flinched. For a second she saw the boy under the king, the one who had once found a starving girl in the outer stables and looked angrier about the bruises on her wrists than she had been herself. Then it was gone. "When did you decide that pity was all I felt?" he asked. She stared. He held her gaze. "Answer me. When you made them believe I was wolfless." The words left like a wound opening. "You gave them the lie," he said. "Yes." Her throat tightened. "And you gave it authority." His eyes closed briefly. There! That was where it hurt. When he opened them again, his voice was rougher. "I thought making you seem small would keep them from hunting what they did not understand. You made me small in every room that mattered." He took that, every word, no excuse, no defense. Then he said, "I was wrong." She had dreamed of hearing that. In smaller ways, over lesser things. Never this. Never when it mattered enough to feel useless. "And now?" she asked. Kaelin looked at her as if the answer would cost him. "Now I know I should have burned the court down years ago." Heat moved through her for the first time since the hall. She hated that too. "Do not say violent things to me just because you've discovered regret." His mouth almost moved. Almost. "You would prefer I lied? I would prefer you had known." Kaelin stepped closer. She should have moved back. She did not. His hand lifted toward her face, stopped an inch away, then lowered. The restraint in that nearly wrecked her. She knew what it cost him, because the thing between them had begun to hum beneath her ribs. Wrong bond, unfinished thread, cursed recognition, whatever it was. Since the forced shift it felt raw, more alive, more mutual. He felt it too. She saw it in the tightness around his mouth. "If I touch you now," he said, voice low, "will you hate it?" The question punched the air from her lungs. It was not whether he wanted to, not even whether he should, whether she would hate it. The care of that made her furious. "You do not get to become careful only after the whole court has seen me humiliated." His gaze darkened. Then tell me what I do get. She stared at him. Tell me what I do get. No king should have sounded like that. No king should have asked. The answer rose before she could stop it. You get honesty, she said, and it's going to hurt you. He did not move. Try me. Leora's fingers clenched in his cloak around her shoulders. I loved you, she said. The room went still. She heard his breath catch. Too late to take it back. Too late to dress it in softer words. Too late to survive it kindly. I loved you when you were reckless and stupid and too kind to understand what it cost anyone weaker than you, she said. I loved you when you were heir, and again when they crowned you, and every day after I learned exactly how impossible that was. Kaelin looked as though she had put a blade into him and turned it carefully. She almost felt sorry for him. Almost. Loved? He asked. The single word was devastation wrapped in grammar. Leora's mouth shook once. She forced it steady. Do not ask me for tenses as if that is the injury here. He made a sound low in his throat. Then, very softly, Leora, don't. Was it ever returned? Her laugh cracked. If you have to ask that after tonight, then no, it never mattered enough. That was the cruelest thing she had ever said to him. She saw it land, saw the king disappear and the man remain behind, taking the blow without armor because he knew he had earned at least part of it. Good, she thought. Good. And then hated herself because his pain did not satisfy. It only proved there was somewhere inside him she could still reach. Outside, footsteps struck the tower stairs. Kaelin straightened at once. A knock came. Your Majesty, said Captain Wren, voice tense through the door. The border alphas are at the outer gates. They have heard. Of course they had. Kaelin's face hardened. Leora almost smiled. You should go save your kingdom. He looked at her as if the two things had become impossible to separate. You are the kingdom at issue. That isn't the same thing. It is to me. He said it too fast. Both of them heard that. Both of them went very still. Captain Wren knocked again. Kaelin's gaze stayed on her. Lock the door after me. She lifted her chin. Afraid someone might force another vial down my throat? No, he said. Afraid you'll decide disappearing is easier than waiting for me. He left before she could answer. That was his first mistake, because he had finally given her something worse than hope. He had given her proof. Chapter 4. By morning, the palace had become a throat tightening around rumor. Servants bowed lower than usual. Guards watched too carefully. Noblewomen who had once looked through her now looked too directly, as if deciding whether fear required more etiquette than contempt. Leora left the tower, because staying there felt like being put away. She should have known Seraphine would be waiting. The woman stood in the eastern gallery overlooking the training court below, silver-clad and poison-calm. Morning light made her look beautiful in the way expensive blades often were. You wear his cloak like a claim, Seraphine said. Leora stopped. You watch servant hallways like a discarded wife. The insult landed. Seraphine smiled anyway. You think last night gave you power? No, Leora said. Last night gave you panic. I'm just enjoying the shape of it. Seraphine stepped closer. Men like Kaelin love disruptions until they become stains. You are already too public. Leora looked over the railing. Kaelin stood in the training yard below, surrounded by commanders, black leathers on, a wooden blade in one hand. Even from this distance she could pick him out instantly. That was a disease. He is looking up, Seraphine said softly. Leora did not react. He always does where you're concerned. I used to think it was irritation. Now Leora turned. Seraphine's expression had gone thin and cold. You should have stayed small. He was better before you became visible. Leora's hand tightened on the railing. You preferred him blind. I preferred him rational. A laugh almost escaped her. That's a strange word for a woman who ordered a forced shift before court. Seraphine's face changed. There, the true bruise. I did not give that order. No, Leora's gaze sharpened. But you enjoyed it. Seraphine's hand moved before either of them had fully decided. The slap cracked through the gallery. Below, the training yard fell still. Leora's cheek burned. So did the sky, the palace, her pride, the old savage thing under her skin. Kaelin looked up. She watched the exact second he understood what had happened. He did not shout. He did not ask. He simply dropped the training blade and came for the stairs with death in his body. Seraphine heard the footfalls too late. Leora touched her own cheek and said, very quietly, "That was stupid." Kaelin reached them moments later. He stopped in front of Leora first. His thumb hovered just short of the red mark. He did not touch. That restraint, under witnesses, was more intimate than a kiss. "Did she strike you?" he asked. "Yes," Leora said. No hesitation, no mercy. He turned to Seraphine. Something in his face made her step back. "Leave the palace." She stared. "For this? For touching what was not yours?" The words dropped between them all. Seraphine's lips parted. "I am not a servant to be dismissed." "No," Kaelin said. "You are a guest who mistook cruelty for status. Leave anyway." Shock moved through the nearby servants and guards like heat. Seraphine swallowed. "You shame me for her." Kaelin's gaze did not shift. "No. You shamed yourself where everyone could see. That should have ended it." Instead, Leora said, before she could stop herself, "Now you know how it feels." Seraphine looked at her as if she would have liked to kill her with bare hands. "Good." Kaelin heard the line too. His jaw tightened, not with disapproval, with recognition. Public pain, public answer. He was learning. He called the guard. "Escort Lady Seraphine from the palace. She will not return without my command." Seraphine laughed once, breathless and stunned. "You think this makes her safe?" Kaelin's answer came like a blade. "No, I think this makes my position impossible to misread." He turned to the servants gathered in the corridor. "Look carefully," he said. "The next person who humiliates her in my house does it knowing they have insulted their king." The silence was immediate. Leora felt it all at once. The shame, the triumph, the danger, the impossible violence of being defended before watchers. Her pulse stumbled. Kaelin looked back at her and saw the crack in her control. Too much, too fast. That, too, he understood. "I'll find you later," he said quietly. Not where others could hear. That mercy almost broke her harder than the public defense. He left with his guards and Seraphine's fury in tow. The corridor breathed again only after he was gone. Leora stood alone with a mark on her cheek and a palace full of eyes that no longer knew whether to fear her or kneel. Neither was safer than contempt had been. That night the council met behind locked doors. Kaelin did not come to her. That was his second mistake. Because when he finally did, midnight had already sharpened her anger into something colder. Chapter 5. He found her in the old records room. Of course he did. Leora sat cross-legged on the floor between shelves of dead kings and older laws, a lantern at her side and 3 open books in her lap. Pack statutes, royal protections, trial rights. She had lived too long, at the mercy of other people's definitions, not to want the language now. Kaelin stopped in the doorway and looked at the spread of texts around her. "You're reading law. I'm reading what men use when they want power to sound respectable." The corner of his mouth moved once. Not amusement, recognition. He shut the door behind him and remained where he was. Too careful again. She hated that almost as much as she wanted it. "They demanded your surrender tonight," he said. Leora kept turning pages. And 3 border alphas threatened war if I refused." That made her look up. Kalen leaned against the closed door, shadows cutting his face into harder line. Marrow believes handing you over would calm the Pax. Marrow should try being handed over himself. I considered it too dry, too real. Leora held his gaze. And what stopped you? His voice lowered, the satisfaction on his face when he realized he'd pushed me far enough to consider murder in council. That was Kalen. Not merely angry. Angrier at being manipulated into anger. She shut the book in her lap. Then perhaps he knows you well. He went still. There, a hit. Kalen moved away from the door and came closer by slow degrees, as if not to spook something wounded. You think I'm predictable where you're concerned. I think you're dangerous where I'm concerned. For whom? The question sat between them too openly. Leora rose. Do not ask me things you're not ready to hear. His eyes darkened. You don't know what I'm ready for. The bond pulsed, low, unsteady, far too aware now. Leora put one book back on the shelf just to do something with her hands. You defended me in public this morning. Yes. You exiled a noblewoman. Yes. You threatened Pax at your border. Yes. The word carried no hesitation. That was the frightening part. She turned. And what do you want for all that? Kalen looked at her for a long time. Then, plainly, The room narrowed. Leora laughed once under her breath because if she didn't, she might shatter. No, his jaw tightened. No, to which part? To the idea that wanting me now repairs anything. I didn't say it repaired it. No? She stepped closer, anger finding the old hurt and sharpening on it. Then why does it sound so easy in your mouth? Why do men always wait until the woman is bloodied in public to discover language for her? Kalen flinched. Again. She was starting to understand the geography of where he broke. He came closer anyway. That isn't what this is. It is exactly what this is. No. His voice roughened. What this is, what it has always been, is me knowing there was something in this palace more important to me than reason allowed, and choosing the wrong way to protect it. She stared. He went on before she could stop him. When you were 14, you would disappear if anyone looked at you too directly. When you were 16, you learned every corridor in the West Wing so you could avoid groups larger than 4. When you were 18, I caught you knife training alone with bruised wrists because someone in the servants' hall thought wolfless girls shouldn't touch weapons. Do you really think I felt nothing all those years? Her throat tightened. The memory hit too clearly. His hand closing over her wrist, his eyes on the bruise, the cold calm in his voice when he asked who had touched her. She had never answered. He had found out anyway, and 3 servants had vanished from palace service by morning. Leora swallowed hard. Feeling is not choosing. Kalen's face went quiet. No, it isn't. Then what are you doing now? His answer came without air between thought and truth. Choosing. The room held still. Leora should have stepped back. Instead, she said, too late. Kalen closed the remaining distance between them. Not touching. Never touching first now, unless she left him no room to doubt. That, he said softly, is the part that keeps me awake. Her pulse tripped. He saw it. The satisfaction that moved through him was brief and savage and immediately caged again. Good. Let him feel something difficult. You kissed me, she said. I know. You regretted it. His eyes flashed. No. The word hit with enough force to make her go still. Kalen leaned closer. I regretted stopping. Heat surged through her so fast she hated her body for its loyalty. He saw that too. His breathing changed. The bond tightened between them, like a wire heated from both ends. Leora whispered, You don't get to sound like that. Then stop standing so close. I was here first. That almost made him smile. He looked down at her mouth. Once. Enough. Marrow will move against you again, he said. He already did. He won't stop. I know. And I won't put you behind a locked door like something to be hidden. That got her full attention. Kaelin held her gaze. Tomorrow night there's a winter assembly. Every noble house, every council seat, border envoys, pack delegates. Marrow wants you absent, terrified, small. His mouth hardened. Come anyway. Leora stared at him. He stepped back at last. If they're going to watch, let them watch properly. He left her with that. An invitation, a challenge, public choosing again, but on terms that felt closer to war than comfort. That was his third mistake, because he had finally asked for her presence instead of arranging it for her, and that was much harder to refuse. Chapter 6. The winter assembly began with music and ended in blood. Leora wore black because the court expected moon-pale softness from women it planned to discuss like property. Kaelin chose not to escort her into the hall. That was deliberate. She knew it the second she stepped through the open doors alone, and all conversation faltered. Good. Let them see her arrive without being led. The great hall had changed since the forced shift. She could feel it in the attention. Once she had been something to dismiss, then something to fear. Now she was something the room was trying to understand quickly enough not to lose power. Kaelin stood on the dais speaking with two visiting alphas when she entered. He did not stop. He did not call for her. He simply looked at her across the hall in full view of everyone and let the silence grow around that single glance until the court itself made room. Leora walked forward slowly. The nobles moved aside. No one reached for her. No one mocked. No one said wolfless. The new danger in a room was always more carefully handled than the old. Lord Marrow smiled from the foot of the council steps. There it was, the real threat. He bowed. Lady Leora, a title. In public, he was going to use one hand to wipe away the blood while the other reached for her throat. She smiled back. Lord Marrow. How brave of you to say my name where I can hear it. The nearest courtiers went still. Marrow's smile held. A court must adapt to changing circumstances. Men like you always call survival a circumstance when it inconveniences you. That one made a few mouths twitch. Kaelin heard. She knew because his gaze cut down from the dais even while he kept the border alpha talking. Marrow leaned closer. Enjoy tonight. It may be the last one this court offers you in comfort. I wasn't aware this court had ever offered me that. His eyes cooled. The crown cannot marry uncertainty. Then perhaps it shouldn't keep creating it. Before he could answer, a servant dropped to one knee beside Leora with a sealed note on a silver tray. She took it. Kaelin's gaze sharpened. The note contained only 4 words. He knows. Don't trust him. No signature. The blood in her body went cold. By the time she looked up, the hall was moving again. Music, conversation, a toast beginning at the far tables. Kaelin descending the dais at last. He crossed the room toward her with the kind of presence that made men straighten before their pride told them not to. Half the hall noticed. The other half pretended not to. Leora folded the note into her palm. He stopped in front of her. You sound surprised. I know you better than that. Her eyes held his. Do you... Something in his face sharpened. Too perceptive, too used to reading her. I've done something, he said. It was not a question. Leora said nothing. Kaelin lowered his voice. What happened? Your enemies think you know too much. Someone warned me. Someone close enough to reach my hand in a crowded hall. Someone inside your court. But all she asked was, do you... His mouth hardened. Leora. The band struck the opening of a ceremonial dance. Every noble in the room knew what came next. The king was expected to choose a partner before the first full measure ended. Half the court looked toward Lady Seraphine's vacant place out of habit. The other half looked at Leora. Kaelin glanced once at the musicians, then back at her. "Dance with me." There it was, public choosing, again. And now a warning in her hand, whispering he knows. Knows what? About her shape, her feelings, the old bond between them, or something worse? He held out his hand. The entire hall watched. Leora should have refused. Instead, she put her hand in his. The room reacted like a throat-swallowing glass. Kaelin led her onto the floor. No smile, no courtly ease, only that same terrible steadiness that made refusal feel more intimate than surrender. His hand settled at her waist. Heat flashed through her, familiar now, unwanted no less for that. "You're angry," he said. "You must be a genius." He did not rise to it. "At me. You seem determined to earn that." The music turned slow enough for cruelty. Kaelin guided her through the first steps. "Talk to me. In front of everyone?" "I'm speaking to you in front of everyone. That should tell you what I'm willing to risk." She almost laughed. That line would have impressed me more before your court drugged me on polished marble. Pain moved through his face. "Good." The note burned in her palm. "What do you know?" she asked. His hand tightened at her waist by a fraction. "About what? About me?" He held her gaze. "Enough to know fear has shaped too much of your life." "Not enough, then? Or too clever to answer plainly?" The music carried them in a slow circle through the center of the room. "You want honesty?" she asked. "Yes. Everyone here thinks I've become your weakness." Kaelin's eyes did not move from hers. And men like Marrow kill weaknesses before dawn." For the first time, true alarm entered his face. He pulled her a fraction closer, under the turn of the dance. Too close for the court. "Perfect. Who reached you?" She looked away. "Does it matter if they're already in your house?" "It matters very much." There was the alpha in him, the dangerous one, the one who turned pursuit into inevitability. The bond tightened. Wrong, unfinished, hungry. Kaelin felt it too. She saw it in the way his control thinned. "Tell me," he said. Before she could answer, Lord Marrow's voice carried across the hall. "Your Majesty," the music faltered. Every eye turned. Marrow stood at the base of the council steps with a document in hand. "Forgive the interruption, but the border pacts have arrived with formal terms." Kaelin did not release Leora. "Now?" "Now," Marrow said, "as the matter concerns the stability of the crown and the woman currently standing in the middle of your winter assembly." The hall went dead. Leora felt Kaelin's hand at her waist go cold. Marrow unfolded the document. 3 border alphas, 2 council houses, and the Valadorn line have invoked the right of doubt. Shock moved through the room. Leora's body stilled. She knew that law. Every bastard, widow, half-blood and inconvenient woman in the kingdom knew it. A right designed to question a royal claim or consort when danger to the throne could be argued before witness. Public, ritualized, humiliating by design. Kaelin's voice dropped into something lethal. "You do not have authority to call that." "No," Marrow said. "But the signatories do." He handed the document to the nearest herald. The man blanched as he read. "By law," the herald said into the silence, "the questioned party must either submit to examination before the Moon Council or be removed from succession, alliance, and public protection until judgment is rendered." Leora understood the trap at once. Not marriage, not even favor, protection. If she refused, she became fair prey outside the king's declared defense. If she accepted, the court got another stage. Kaelin released her, only to step fully in front of her. "No," the single word echoed. Marrow lifted his chin. "Then you defy law before all the pacts." "Yes." The room broke into whispers. The border alphas smiled behind their cups. Not because they had won, because they had made him choose in public between Crown and her. Exactly where they wanted him. Leora stepped out from behind him. "No," she said. Kalen turned sharply. No? I'll do it. His face changed. Absolutely not. The whole court was listening. Good. Let them hear the crack. You asked me to come tonight, she said. I'm here. I did not ask you here to feed you to them. And yet here they are. Kalen's voice lowered dangerously. Leora. She looked at him and saw the edge of obsession before he did. Perfect. That was what they all needed to see. That the king could bleed. I will not be hidden behind your defiance, she said. Not now. Maro smiled faintly. Kalen saw it. Then, before the whole court, he did the one thing she never expected. He looked at her and said, loud enough for every ear in the hall, Then if you go before them, you do not go as my chosen. The world stopped. The words hit harder because only she heard the second layer of them, the wild warning in his eyes, the impossible demand for trust. The silent don't give them the right to kill you through me. But the court heard only rejection. Gasps broke. Someone laughed in disbelief. Maro's satisfaction flashed nakedly. Leora stood motionless on the dance floor with every eye in the kingdom cutting over her skin. There it was. The public wound she had always feared him giving her. Not because he did not want her. Because he had chosen the crown's language to save her. The court would never know that. Only the pain of it mattered. Kalen's gaze held hers like a hand around a throat. Trust me, it said. Too late, she thought. Too late. She stepped back, then another. The hall watched the king strip his protection from her in public, and whatever his reason, the damage was perfect. Leora said, very quietly, You chose beautifully, and walked out while the court devoured the ruin. Chapter 7. The palace stopped belonging to her before she reached the west stairs. Servants who had bowed that morning lowered their eyes and moved away too quickly. Guards no longer stepped aside at once. Every corridor carried the same message. Whatever place she had briefly occupied had been removed again by a single sentence from the king's mouth. Not as my chosen. The words followed her like teeth. By the time she reached the tower, Princess Elira was waiting inside. Kalen's younger sister had his eyes and none of his restraint. She looked furious enough to bite through steel. Tell me he did not mean that the way it sounded. Leora shut the door behind her with more care than she felt. Does it matter? Yes, it mattered to the room. Elira crossed to her. He sent me after you. That made something cold move under her breastbone. Of course he did. He said, if you tried to leave the palace tonight, I should stop you. Leora laughed, a terrible sound. Then he should have sent soldiers. Elira stared at her. Leora, no. She turned away, wrapping her arms around herself, because the room had started shaking in ugly little pieces. Do not use my name like you can soften this. He was trying to save me, she wheeled back. Men always save women by humiliating them in public and explaining later. It's one of their favorite talents. Elira actually winced. Good. Let someone besides Kalen feel it. He would never abandon you, she said. He already did. The answer came too fast, too clean, too close to truth for comfort. Elira stepped closer, voice low now. Maro wanted legal grounds to tear you from the king's protection. If Kalen openly named you before the right, they could claim you were influencing the crown through an unstable bond. He was trying to sever the argument, not you. Leora went still. She knew that. Somewhere beneath the hurt she had known the shape of the move the second he made it. That did not change what it had cost. That explanation would matter more, she said quietly, if he hadn't chosen a room full of people to let it cut. Elira had no answer for that. Neither did Leora. Outside, bells sounded the first watch. The Right of Doubt would convene by moonrise tomorrow, which meant she had less than a day to prepare to be publicly examined, questioned, weighed, and likely degraded again by the same men who had wanted her chained. Elira reached slowly into her sleeve and withdrew a leather-wrapped bundle. Leora looked at it, A travelling knife, silver powder, and the old Northern Pass seal, Elira said. If you choose to leave tonight, I won't stop you. Leora stared at her. That's treason, she said. Elira's mouth thinned. I'm my brother's sister. We were raised on inconvenient impulses. Despite everything, a small laugh escaped Leora. It hurt on the way out. She took the bundle. Elira's gaze softened. He is ripping himself apart downstairs. Good. You don't mean that. Leora looked toward the window. No, I mean I wanted him to hurt less than this. Elira went quiet. Then she asked the one question no one had yet. What do you want? Leora closed her fingers around the knife bundle. The honest answer was impossible. Safety, distance, revenge. His voice on its knees. A room without witnesses. A life in which she had never looked at him too long. A life in which he had looked sooner. I want, she said slowly, to stop being a thing men negotiate over. Elira nodded. Then do not stand still while they do it. After she left, Leora sat in the dark for a long time. The old pull beneath her ribs twisted and burned. Kaylen's emotional state carried through it now in jagged flashes since the forced shift. Rage, control, a pressure like pacing under skin. The bond was changing shape whether she permitted it or not. She hated that he could still reach her through it. She hated more that she could feel the exact moment he came to her door and stopped outside. He did not knock. He stayed there in the hall, breathing on the other side of wood. Leora stood motionless in the center of the room. Minutes passed. Then his voice, low through the door. Open it. No. Silence. Then, please. That word almost opened her hand by itself. Instead, she said, You should have remembered that tone downstairs. He took the blow. She heard it in the way his next breath changed. I know. That's not enough. No. His voice roughened. Nothing I say through a door is enough. Then go away. I can't. The bond flared hot and painful. Good. Let him feel the same knife. You can, she said. You're king. Apparently you can do anything in public except choose the right wound. Silence. Brutal. Full. Then very quietly, if I had named you there, they would have called for immediate binding until judgment. Marrow wanted your throat under law, Leora. I gave them distance instead. Her eyes closed. Yes, she knew. He went on anyway, because this was what men did when they needed forgiveness and thought truth might buy it. I thought I could make you hate me for a night, if it meant you stayed alive long enough to understand. Something in her snapped. She crossed the room and yanked the door open. Kaylen stood there alone, stripped down to black shirt and dark trousers, crown absent, jaw shadowed, eyes wrecked. The king was gone. Only the man who had cut her and bled for it remained. You thought wrong, she said. He looked at her as if he wanted to touch and knew he had forfeited the right. Yes, I understood exactly what you were doing. That shook him more than anger had. Leora stepped closer. That is not what hurt. His breath stalled. What hurt, she said, each word precise now, is that your first instinct in a room full of wolves was still to let them hear your mouth reject me. He looked destroyed. Good. She had wanted him there all night. You made me stand in the same kind of silence twice, she whispered. Once when they forced me open. Once when you closed the door yourself. Kaylen made a sound under his breath. Pain, maybe. Or guilt finally given shape. Then he said, Hit me if it helps. That almost made her laugh again. You want punishment because it's cleaner than this. His eyes did not leave hers. I want something honest, then here. Her throat tightened. I would have chosen death over hearing that from you in front of them. The words hit him so hard he had to look away. For 1 second, only one. Then he looked back and said, Raw enough now to be dangerous. Don't say death to me tonight. The bond surged, hard, mutual, ugly with fear. Leora felt his. He felt hers. Both of them froze. This was new. Not merely awareness, not instinct, not attraction. Emotion crossing between them, sharp enough to bruise. Kaelin's face changed as he understood it. He stepped back first. That almost undid her more than the public rejection had. "I'm sorry," he said. "No," she whispered. "You don't get that word tonight." He nodded once, then left before the bond could make either of them say something they would not survive hearing. By dawn, Leora was gone. Chapter 8. Kaelin found out at sunrise. Captain Wren entered the council chamber mid-argument, saw the king's face, and wisely dismissed everyone else before speaking. "Her tower is empty." The room went still. Marrow, still present because Kaelin had not yet found a way to kill him that would not start a war, looked almost pleased before he hid it. Kaelin heard the pleasure anyway. He rose so fast the chair behind him struck the stone. Who saw her leave? No one admits it. Then no one saw enough. Wren handed him a folded scrap of paper. Only 4 words. "I chose distance first." Kaelin stared at them. No signature. Didn't need one. Marrow spoke into the silence. Perhaps she understood the wisdom of the right after all. Kaelin crossed the room so quickly Wren barely caught his breath. He grabbed Marrow by the throat and shoved him against the council wall. The chamber erupted. Guards moved. Wren stopped them with one raised hand and what little faith he still had in his king's judgment. Marrow clawed at Kaelin's wrist. "Your Majesty, say her absence pleases you again," Kaelin said, voice low enough to terrify. "See what your tongue costs." Marrow's face purpled. Kaelin released him only when the man was nearly sliding down the wall. He turned to Wren. "Seal the gates," Marrow choked out. "The right convenes by moonrise. If she flees, she concedes guilt." Kaelin looked back at him. "No," he said. "If she flees, it means this court taught her leaving was safer than staying." His mouth hardened. "You will answer for that before the week ends." Then he left the chamber with murder following close behind him like scent. He found Alira first. She did not bother lying. "I gave her the pass seal." Kaelin stared at his sister. "Why?" "Because you publicly rejected the woman you're in love with and expected a speech after—" The words hit exactly where intended. Good. She had his blood. Kaelin's jaw tightened. "If anything happens to her, it will have happened because you made her the center of their knife work twice." He turned away before the guilt in that could become visible. Too late. Alira saw. Wren did too. So did every servant in the hall pretending not to listen. There was no privacy left in pain like this. "Which pass?" he asked. "The northern one. Alone?" She wanted it that way. He almost smiled. Bitter and brief. Of course she had. By noon, the king had ridden out with 8 men and sent 30 more in widening circles through the winter wood. By dusk, he had found blood in the snow, not hers. A rival scout's, then another, then the broken shaft of a silver arrow. The forest around the northern pass went unnaturally quiet. Kaelin dismounted and crouched at the edge of a clearing full of signs only a wolf would read properly. Struggle, quick, violent, skilled. At least 6 men. One of them dead before he'd managed a second breath. Leora's scent burned through the cold air like a challenge. Alive. Cornered recently. Angry enough to shift the world around her. Kaelin rose slowly. He could feel the bond now. Not complete, not holy, not anything the priests would name without flinching, but real. More real every hour since the forced shift. It pulled at him through fear, fury, distance, and the raw, torn place where public rejection still lived between them. Wren came to his shoulder. Track split. 2 went east with a dragging pattern. Kaelin's face changed. Not her, the wood said. Something else heavy. Dead weight. Captive, maybe. but the silver in the snow meant someone had come prepared for a beast. For her. She fought them off, Ren said. Kaelin looked at the blood again. No. Ren went still. Kaelin's mouth hardened. She hunted them. They found her after moonrise in the ruins of an old border shrine, standing in the center of a broken stone circle with one hand braced on a pillar and blood down the side of her face. 4 men lay around her, 2 dead, 2 unconscious. The sight hit Kaelin with equal parts relief and savage pride. She had always been dangerous. Now the world was finally paying attention correctly. Leora looked up as the riders entered the ruin. Her eyes went silver for one bright second, then cold. You took your time. Kaelin dismounted before anyone else could speak. You left. You gave a very persuasive performance. He stopped 3 paces away. The moon made every line in her face sharper. Blood at her temple, torn sleeve, bruised knuckles. His body moved on instinct. She stepped back at once. He stopped immediately. That hurt more than the blood. Ren and the others, to their credit, pulled back without being told. Wolves knew when the center of a scene did not belong to them. Kaelin kept his hands at his sides. Are you hurt? Yes. The honesty hit harder than if she had lied. He took it without flinching. Let me see. No, Leora. Don't use my name like you have claim over it tonight. His face emptied. Good. Behind her, one of the unconscious men groaned. Kaelin's gaze cut down. Border leathers, Valadorn colors hidden under travel cloaks. Assassins, then, or deniable hunters. Same difference. Who sent them? He asked. They had silver bolts, a suppression chain, and an order to bring me breathing if possible, she said. Guess. Kaelin's jaw clenched hard enough to hurt. Seraphine, or her father. Or Marrow, or any man who thinks a public right is easier to win once the subject arrives half dead. She looked at him. You cultivate beautiful company. He deserved that. I'll kill them. Something like terrible amusement flashed through her. There he is. Kaelin stepped closer by inches. You're bleeding. You're repetitive. You're impossible. That almost made her smile. Almost. The bond between them burned hot and ragged. Relief, anger, fear. The violent need to make sure he was real and not another mistake her body would pay for. Kaelin felt it too. She saw the exact second it hit him from her side. How badly she had feared he would come too late again. His expression changed. No pity. Something fiercer, more wrecked. He lowered his voice. You thought I wouldn't follow. I thought you'd come with soldiers and law and explanations. I brought those too. That one landed between them strange enough to hurt. She swayed. Just once. Kaelin was on her before she fully tipped. One arm catching her waist, the other bracing her shoulder. Leora went rigid in his hold. His voice dropped to nearly nothing. If you ask me to let go, I will. Her face was inches from his, blood at her temple, snowlight on her mouth, fury and exhaustion, and the old thing between them lit sharp enough to cut. She whispered, That is the problem. His grip tightened by a fraction. Say it clearly. When you are kind, she said, I forget to hate you properly. Kaelin shut his eyes. Just for a second. When he opened them again, there was no king left in them at all, only a man badly losing the ability to survive distance. Then stop trying, he said. The words were so raw they emptied the ruin. Leora looked at him, at the blood on her own hand where it pressed against his chest, at the way he did not move closer even while his whole body strained toward her like restraint had become a physical injury. Then she lifted one shaking hand and touched the cut on his lip from the hall, the same one she had noticed too late in the tower. Kaelin stopped breathing. You kept that, she said softly. He answered without air. You gave it to me, the bond snapped. Not complete, not mated, not blessed, but undeniable. Emotion crossed between them in a brutal rush. His guilt, her hunger, his obsession, her old grief, his terror of losing her, her knowledge that he already had once. Leora gasped. Kaelin cursed under his breath. Then he kissed her. Not like the balcony, not like hunger finally allowed to speak, like a man dragging himself across broken glass to get to the only truth left. She kissed him back with every wrong thing still alive between them. Good. It made the kiss honest. By the time he pulled away, both of them were breathing like they had run through snow with knives in their lungs. "You left," he said against her mouth. "You rejected me to save your life and destroyed my pride." He nodded once. Yes, that was all he said. No excuse, no softening, just yes. It was the first thing he had given her that felt clean. She touched his jaw once, hard enough to sting. Good. Then she let him carry her back to the horses. Chapter 9. The right of doubt met beneath the moon. The court packed the circular judgment hall like wolves around a kill. Nobles, alphas, councillors, priests, the Valadorns in pale silver, Marrow at the centre, Seraphine at her father's side like a wound that had learned to speak. Leora entered on her own feet. That mattered. Kaelin walked beside her but not in front, dressed in black ceremonial leathers instead of royal silk, crown absent, sword visible. The choice alone sent a murmur through the assembly. Kings attended rites in state. Men went to war in leather. Good. Let them understand what kind of night this was. The moon circle lay in white stone at the center of the hall. Anyone called into it stood exposed beneath sky-open arches and all the watching tiers beyond. Humiliation by architecture. Leora knew that instinctively the second she saw it. Seraphine smiled from her seat. "Welcome back." Leora looked at her. "You should have run farther." That wiped the smile from her face. Marrow struck the ceremonial staff once against stone. The right of doubt is called to examine danger to the throne, instability of claim and unlawful influence over the crown. His eyes went to Leora. No surprise. Kaelin's voice cut through the hall before Marrow could continue. "Then begin with me." Silence dropped like a blade. Marrow blinked. "Your Majesty? You invoked unlawful influence over the crown." Kaelin stepped into the moon circle himself. "Speak your accusation properly. Name what power you think controls me." Nobody breathed. Marrow recovered quickly. "This is not about you. It is entirely about me," Kaelin said. "You question her position because of mine. You question her danger because of my defense. You question her worth because of my interest. Then judge the part that belongs to me first." The hall shuddered with the audacity of it. Seraphine rose half out of her seat. "You cannot submit yourself to examination for a servant." Kaelin looked at her. She sat. Marrow's mouth tightened. "Very well. Do you deny extraordinary attachment to the woman in question?" Kaelin's answer came too fast for anyone to doubt it. "No," the court reacted. A visible tremor of noise. "Gods and beasts." He admitted it. Marrow pressed. "Do you deny that such attachment has altered your political judgment?" "No." Shock rippled harder. Kaelin turned, found Leora where she stood outside the circle, and held her gaze before the entire room. "It has altered every judgment I make where her safety is concerned." The words struck the assembly like thrown iron. Leora did not move. This was why men feared him, not the anger, not the rank, the precision with which he weaponized truth. Marrow's smile grew thin. "Then you admit influence. I admit value. That one hurt Marrow." "Good." The old alpha priest in charge of rites leaned forward from his seat of white stone. "Do you place her above the peace of the Pax?" Kaelin did not look at him. "Yes." That broke the room. Voices, shouts. Someone on the upper tier actually stood up and demanded censure. Seraphine laughed in disbelief. Lord Valadorn cursed aloud. The border alphas leaned in like men watching blood spill exactly where they had planned. Leora's pulse hammered. This was not how kings behaved in rights. This was how men burned bridges because obsession had become simpler than caution. And all of it was happening because of her. Marrow struck the staff for silence. You admit, therefore, that your judgment has been compromised. No, Kaelin said. I admit only that you've mistaken my choosing for weakness because the woman I chose was once easy to insult. The hall went dead. He turned then, fully, to Leora. You wanted honesty where everyone could hear it, he said. Every witness in the kingdom watched the king give her the center of the room. You were never my weakness because you are dangerous, he said. You were my weakness because I let this court teach you that surviving quietly was the same thing as being safe. I was wrong. Leora's throat tightened. The old priest's voice cut in. Words do not answer the right. The woman must still stand examination. Marrow smiled again. There it was, his trap still alive. Kaelin's body went very still. Leora saw it, understood at once. If she refused now, the court won. If he refused for her, the court won differently. So she stepped into the circle. The hall drew breath as one. Kaelin's face changed. Leora, no. She looked at him and then at the assembly beyond. You bled enough for one night. Marrow's satisfaction sharpened. The priest raised his staff. State your nature before witness. Leora stood in the moon circle under all their eyes and felt, for one impossible second, every old terror in her life arrive together. The first shift at 8, her mother's scream, the village smoke, the years of being useful but never safe, the hall, the rejection, the bond, the blood in the shrine, Kaelin kneeling. Kaelin cutting her to save her, Kaelin coming after her anyway. Pain before power. She understood that now in her bones. Without all of it, she would still be standing in corners waiting for rooms to decide her value. She lifted her chin. My nature, she said. The moonlight found her face. The hall waited. I am the thing your fear created by trying to bury what you could not control. Murmurs broke. The priest raised the staff higher. Shift. Leora did not look at him. She looked at Marrow, at Seraphine, at the nobles who had once laughed, at the guards who had aimed arrows, then finally at Kaelin, who stood on the edge of the circle looking like he might murder the moon itself if it turned wrong. The bond surged. This time she did not fight it. The shift came clean, no vile, no dragging violation, no humiliation forcing her open. Choice. Moonlight poured over her body as bone and muscle rewrote themselves in silver and dark. Gasps broke through the tears. Some wolves bowed instinctively before they realized what they were doing. Her tail coiled across the white stone like a line no one would cross twice. When she rose fully, vast and terrible and magnificent in the moon circle, the hall understood all at once that the thing they had tried to shame had become too large for their language. Seraphine stood. Abomination! Leora turned her head. Only that. Seraphine fell silent. The priest stared, shaken from ritual certainty for the first time in decades. Leora's voice came through the shape older, lower, full of something the room had not prepared for. Continue. No one did, because now they had seen. And seeing had not made her lesser, it had made the room smaller. Marrow tried anyway. A dangerous form does not prove loyalty. Kaelin stepped into the circle beside her. The assembly erupted again. He should not have been there. The right forbade shared position. Judgment required isolation. Hierarchy demanded distance. He ignored all of it. Then, before the court, before the packs, before every man who had tried to use law as a knife, Kaelin dropped to one knee beside her transformed shape. The hall forgot itself. Leora froze. Kaelin looked up at her and said, Then judge mine. The old priest actually stood from his seat. Your Majesty. Kaelin did not look at him. If loyalty is the question, mine was compromised the moment I let this court wound her for my convenience. Write that into your law. The words ripped through the assembly. He went on, voice carrying now with the force of a king choosing where history would cut. I defended her too late. I wanted her too late. I used power too late. But hear this clearly. There will never be a version of my reign in which she stands alone before wolves while I stay clean above them. Leora felt the room change around them. Not slowly, absolutely. This was not pity, not rescue. Public self-implication, public lowering, public choosing so complete it could not be mistaken for impulse. The deepest kind of cost. Marrow understood first. Panic flashed across his face. Too late, the border alphas began to bow. Not to Kaelin, to the choice, to the fact that opposing her now meant opposing a king who had tied his own legitimacy to hers in front of every witness that mattered. Seraphine stood rigid with hatred and disbelief. Lord Valadorn tried to rise and demand something, order, law, consequence. But his own allies were already lowering their eyes. Power had moved. The old priest looked at Kaelin, then at Leora, then at the room that had already decided. Finally, he struck the staff once against stone. The right of doubt is answered. Silence. Then, unwillingly, the questioned woman stands under royal choosing and shared consequence. No further claim may be made against her person without challenge to the crown itself. The hall exhaled. Leora shifted back inside the moon circle, her human form returning under a silence so absolute it felt sacred and ugly at once. Kaelin rose immediately, stripping off his ceremonial cloak and wrapping it around her as he had in the great hall. This time, when he did it, nobody mistook the gesture. Seraphine's voice broke the silence anyway. You would burn your kingdom for her. Kaelin did not even turn. Watch me. That ended her. Chapter 10. Marrow tried to kill her before dawn. He chose poison over steel, which was fitting. Men like him always preferred the sort of murder they could discuss afterward with legal regret. Leora tasted it in the wine before it reached her throat. Not because she had become some magical seer after the moonrite, because she had spent too many years at tables where women lower in rank learned to smell danger before they drank. The cup shattered against the wall. Kaelin was on his feet before the glass stopped falling. The council breakfast became chaos. Guards closing ranks, servants screaming, chairs scraping stone. Marrow half rising with the expression of a man who had not expected failure to happen so publicly. Leora pointed at him. That one. Kaelin moved. No discussion, no questioning, no royal process. He crossed the room, caught Marrow by the collar, and dragged him over the table. The council screamed. Good. Marrow hit the floor hard enough to lose breath. Kaelin's boot came down on his throat before anyone else could reach them. You poisoned my table? Kaelin asked. Marrow clawed at the floor. You poison what I put under my protection? The boot pressed harder. Leora stood motionless in the center of the room, blood cold, pulse steady. This was the strange new thing about power. Not that it removed fear, that it gave fear somewhere to stand. Lord Valadorn actually stepped forward. Your Majesty, if you kill a council lord without trial. Kaelin looked up. Valadorn stopped. You think trial is what I'm considering? Kaelin asked. No one answered. Leora walked around the shattered breakfast table and crouched in front of Marrow. He looked less like a strategist on the floor. Good, you wanted me examined, she said. Observe this properly. Marrow tried to speak. Kaelin's boot still made that difficult. Leora leaned in just enough for only him to hear the next words. You called me dangerous after forcing danger into the room yourself. Men like you always mistake consequence for corruption. His eyes widened. He understood then. Not her shape, His error. That was enough. She rose. Kaelin watched her, waiting. That mattered most. The room waited too. That mattered almost as much. Leora looked at Marrow and said, "Don't kill him." Shock rippled through the chamber. Kaelin's face did not move. Why? Because dead men become excuses. Her gaze sharpened. Living traitors become warnings. Something dark and proud moved through his expression. He eased the pressure of his boot but did not step away. Leora faced the room. "Lord Marrow will stand public treason inquiry by moonfall," she said. Councillors stared. Kaelin stared too. She continued, "The charge will be attempted murder of a woman under royal protection, incitement of unlawful force in the Great Hall, manipulation of crown proceedings through concealed violence, and conspiracy with foreign and domestic noble houses to destabilize succession." Silence. No one had expected her to know the laws that well. Good. Kaelin's gaze burned over her profile. When she finished, he said into the room, "You heard her. Make it so." The council moved at once. That was power too. Not just command, endorsement. Later, when the guards had taken Marrow away in irons and the breakfast room had been scrubbed so violently it still smelled of spilled fear, Kaelin found Leora alone in the south gallery overlooking the river. He shut the door behind him. No witnesses, no court, no excuses. "You spared him," he said. She leaned against the stone balustrade. "I humiliated him." Kaelin came closer. "You prefer that?" "Yes." His mouth moved once. "Good." That almost made her laugh. He stopped a breath away. "You also just took command of my council room. You object?" "No." His voice lowered. I nearly knelt again. Her pulse stumbled. "Don't say things like that in hallways. Then stop standing in them where I can find you." She looked at him, at the cut of morning light over his face, at the bruised exhaustion in him from 2 nights of almost losing her in different ways, at the obsession he was no longer disguising well enough to be called cautious. "What are we doing?" she asked. Kaelin did not answer quickly. Good. The truth should cost him. At last he said, "Whatever it is, I am done doing it halfway." Heat flashed through her. Dangerous. Immediate. She looked away toward the river. "That sounds like a threat." "It's a vow. Those are more frightening." He stepped closer until his body heat reached her through silk and stone and memory. "Then be afraid properly." The line hit hard enough to quiet her. Kaelin lifted one hand, stopped before touching her face, waited. This time she closed the distance herself, only enough for his fingers to find her jaw. The contact was so light it felt cruel. He exhaled like a man learning pain had another shape. "You rejected me in public," she whispered. "Yes." "You let them see it." "Yes." "You do not get my forgiveness because you suffered after—" His thumb moved once under her jaw. "I know." "Then what do you get?" His eyes held hers without a trace of his king's mask. "The chance to earn what I ruined." That was the right answer. Not enough, but right. Leora rose onto her toes and kissed him once. Short, hard, a punishment and a promise in the same breath. When she drew back, Kaelin looked wrecked. "Good. Earn faster," she said, and left him in the gallery with his control torn open. Chapter 11. The treason inquiry became a spectacle by noon and a reversal by nightfall. Marrow had expected negotiation. He got witnesses. Servants came first, then guards, then scribes, then lesser nobles who had laughed in the great hall and now found sudden moral courage with the king's mood tilting clearly toward conviction. Seraphine's father tried to delay proceedings. Kaelin stripped 2 of his trade privileges before the second objection. That ended the interruptions. Leora sat at Kaelin's right hand through the whole thing. Not below, not hidden, at his right hand. The position alone did more damage to the old order than any speech could. Every accusation Marrow once used against her came back sharpened against him. secret vials, bribed guards, pact letters with border alphas, private correspondence with House Valadorn arranging for a controlled removal should the rite fail. When Seraphine's own maid was dragged in trembling and confessed that silver restraints had been prepared in advance of the great hall humiliation, the room finally broke. Seraphine stood. She lies. The maid collapsed to her knees. My lady ordered the chain polished. Silence. Seraphine looked at her father. Lord Valadorn did not look back. Ah, Leora thought. There it is, public abandonment. Kaelin rose. The entire inquiry chamber stilled. House Valadorn is stripped of court preference, he said. Lady Seraphine is barred from royal lands, titles and claim. Lord Marrow forfeits office, estate and blood right in the capital. Marrow lunged then, not at the king, but at Leora. The room exploded. Kaelin moved faster. So did she. Her tail snapped out in half-shift and struck Marrow hard enough to send him across the inquiry floor before his hand reached her throat. Guards piled onto him an instant later. Every noble in the chamber saw it, saw the speed, the control, the instinct, saw that she had not struck from panic, only precision. Kaelin turned to the room with murder in his face. Anyone else? Nobody even breathed. Good. He looked at the guards. Take him to the outer cells. At dawn he leaves the capital in irons. If he's seen again within my borders, hang him at the gate. This time no one protested. As the guards dragged Marrow away, he spat blood and fury across the floor. You kneel for a beast, Kaelin smiled. Cold, beautiful, finished. I kneel, he said, for the woman your fear failed to bury. That ended him. By evening, the palace had changed shape again. Not because the law moved that quickly, because people did. The same women who had once looked through Leora now bowed with measured respect. The guards who had aimed arrows lowered their heads when she passed. Servants brought her wine without trembling enough to spill. It was not affection, better, it was correction. Kaelin found her on the eastern terrace as the bells announced nightfall. She stood alone under torchlight, watching the winter stars catch on the river. You should be inside, he said. She did not turn. That sounds like king speech. It's worry. That sounds worse. He came to stand beside her, close enough for heat, not close enough for touch. For a while they said nothing. The silence between them had changed. It no longer felt like absence. It felt like something building. At last he asked, Do you know what they're saying now? That I'm dangerous, difficult, and probably bad for tradition? His mouth almost moved. Among other things. She looked at him then. And what are you saying? Kaelin held her gaze. That I am asking you to marry me. The terrace vanished. No dramatic lead-in, no speech, no performance. A blow that clean deserved stillness. Leora stared. Kaelin's face remained calm only because he was very good at disguising terror as control. You don't waste time, she said. I wasted years. That hit harder than the proposal. Her throat tightened. You choose interesting moments. There are no safe ones left. Also true. Kaelin stepped closer. I am not asking because the court needs quiet. Good. I am not asking because the packs need a symbol. Better. I am asking, he said. And now the control in his voice gave way just enough to show the damage under it. Because every time you are out of my sight too long, my body acts as though I have misplaced something vital. Because I have loved you in the wrong language for years and nearly lost you before I learned the right one. Because I do not know what that bond is, only that it gets sharper every time you pull away. Because I am tired of pretending I can survive this at a distance. Leora did not move. He kept going, because he was finally wise enough to know silence would not save him. And because, he said, lower now, if I ask you badly, I trust you to punish me. That almost made her smile. Almost. She looked out over the river again. If I say yes, they'll call it strategy. I don't care. They'll say you married me because you had to. I will make them regret the sentence. You make a lot of violent promises. You make me a violent thinker. That one got her. A breath of laughter escaped before she could stop it. Kaylin's face changed at once, hope arriving too quickly, too nakedly, too dangerously. She saw it, and for the first time understood exactly why readers of men like him stayed hungry for pages, because hope looked better on predators than comfort ever could. Leora turned back to him. You do realize I may still refuse. His mouth hardened. Yes, and I'll remain unbearable until you change your mind. There, that was the line. The shamelessness of it nearly undid her. She rose onto her toes and kissed him slowly this time. No punishment in it, no escape, only a deliberate wrecking. When she drew back, Kaylin looked as if he had forgotten how to be king or wolf or anything with a functioning spine. Was that yes? He asked. Leora touched the side of his throat where pulse beat hard and visible under skin. That was maybe. His eyes darkened. Cruel. You like difficulty, I like you. The words came too fast, too unguarded, too true. Leora's heart misstepped. Good, she thought. Let us both suffer a little longer. Chapter 12. The attack came on the wedding day. Of course it did. Peace had become too expensive for the kingdom to let it arrive without blood. The great hall had been remade for ceremony. Black and silver drapery, winter roses, banners of every allied pack hung beneath the carved wolves of the crown. Nobles packed the chamber in enough glittering tension to set the marble alight. The same room that had once watched her dragged into humiliation now waited to see whether the king would place a crown beside his own and call it justice. Leora stood in the antechamber beyond the hall, with Alira fastening the clasp at the back of her gown. You look dangerous, the princess said. I hope so. You look like the answer to a threat. That was closer. The gown was black silk with silver embroidery at the hem, sleeveless despite the season, designed to leave the old scars on her shoulders visible if anyone stood near enough to count them. Let them. Hiding had fed too many other people already. A servant burst into the chamber white-faced. My lady, the Western Guard line. The wall shook, not metaphor. Stone actually shook. Alira cursed. Outside, the hall exploded into screams. Leora moved before anyone gave orders. She ran through the open doors and into chaos. The western gallery had collapsed inward in a burst of splintered stone and silver-tipped bolts. Smoke rolled through the upper arches. Guests pushed toward the exits. Guards formed rank. Somewhere, a horse screamed in the outer courtyard. Assassination was too small a word. This was war dragged indoors. Kaylin stood at the center of it, bareheaded and lethal, already half-shifted around the eyes, shouting commands through the panic. When he saw her, something near madness flashed through his face. Get her out! He roared. A silver bolt flew. Leora turned before the guard beside her even saw it. Her tail snapped out in a half-shift and sent the arrow into a pillar. The hall froze for one impossible second. Then the attackers came through the broken gallery. Not border wolves this time. Mercenaries in noble colors, stripped of insignia. Enough to make the funding deniable. Not enough to disguise the source from anyone with a functioning brain. Valadorn's last move. Good. Let them die publicly too. Kaylin reached her in 3 strides, sword in one hand, the other catching her wrist. Behind me. Leora looked at the smoking hall around them. You really don't know me well at all. Then she shifted. Fully. Right there, in the wedding hall. In front of nobles, priests, allies, rivals, and every witness the kingdom could possibly have offered. Moonlight from the shattered western arches poured over her as bone and muscle rewrote themselves clean and fast. No humiliation in it now, only power chosen in public. The room changed. The attackers actually faltered. They should have. Leora hit them like consequence. One mercenary went through a banquet table, another slammed into the base of a pillar hard enough to leave blood there. Her tail broke a silver chain before it reached Kaylin's throat. The third wolf, trying to circle the dais, lost his nerve the second she turned those silver eyes on him. Kaylin fought beside her without once trying to command her out of the way. That mattered. He moved like a king who had finally learned the difference between protecting and possessing. The hall became a brutal dance of steel and instinct, smoke and overturned tables, screaming nobles and guards striking the floor with spear butts to clear space for their monarch and their future queen. At the center of it, the bond between Leora and Kaylin burned hotter with every shared movement, not holy, not clean, real. She felt his focus where it cut, his fear when she took a blade along her flank, his savage satisfaction when she knocked a mercenary off the upper stairs before he reached Kaylin's blind side. He felt hers too. That was the dangerous part. The terrible, intimate violence of battle becoming the place they understood each other best. When the last attacker fell, the hall went into a ringing silence broken only by groans, crackling fire, and the rough breathing of everyone still alive. Kaylin stood amid the wreckage with blood on his sleeve and smoke in his hair. Leora shifted back at the center of the ruined wedding floor. No shame in it now, no forced exposure, no court deciding what it meant. Only a room full of witnesses watching power choose its own shape. Kaylin stripped off his torn outer coat and wrapped it around her by reflex. Again, always. Then he looked at the hall, the broken gallery, the cowering nobles, the blood on white stone. The same room that had once watched her humiliation. Perfect. He turned to the assembly and said, voice carrying through smoke and ruin, "You wanted to know whether she belongs beside me." No one moved. He held out his hand to Leora. Not command, invitation, choice. Her pulse hit once, hard. Then she put her hand in his. Kaylin lifted their joined hands before the whole hall. "Look carefully," he said. "The next person who reaches for my crown through her will learn how little of this kingdom I need intact to keep her." No one in the room doubted him. Good. The old priest, soot on his ceremonial robes and blood on one cuff, looked around the wrecked hall and made the only sensible decision available. "Continue the rite," he said hoarsely. A laugh almost escaped Leora. Only this kingdom would respond to assassination by proceeding with marriage. But maybe that too was justice, refusing interruption, forcing memory to build over old wounds until the room itself learned a different story. The ceremony resumed in smoke and broken torchlight. Kaylin did not wait for prepared vows. He looked at her, ruin all around them, and said, "The first time they watched you break, I stood too far away. The second time I wounded you myself trying to keep you alive. I will spend the rest of my life making both memories expensive." Leora's throat tightened. He went on, voice lower now, meant for her and somehow carrying anyway. "You were easy for them to shame when you were alone. That ends here." The hall heard every word. "Good. Let them." Leora looked at the room. The nobles, the guards, Elira crying without elegance in the second row. Wren standing bloodied and grinning near a broken pillar. The old priest waiting with smoke in his beard. The same marble that had once held her on her knees. Then she looked at Kaylin. At the man who had failed her, found her, hurt her, followed her, chosen her, and kept choosing more dangerously each time. "You did lose me," she said. His face changed at once. "I know. And if you ever use public cruelty to save me again," Kaylin swallowed, "then I'll deserve whatever public ruin you choose in return." That was the right answer, the only answer. Leora stepped closer until their breath met under smoke and torchlight, and the whole ruined kingdom watched. "Good," she said softly, "because I was easy to shame when I was weak." Kaylin's gaze dropped to her mouth. "You are impossible to shame now." She kissed him before the sentence finished. The hall broke into something louder than relief, not applause. Surrender. By the time the old priest declared them bound before moon and crown, the room had already accepted what the law would only later catch up to. Love had hurt her publicly. Love had chosen her publicly. And that was not the end of the reversal, because when Kaelin led her up the dais and seated her not one step below but beside him, equal in height before the court, every noble in the hall understood the final shape of the thing they had failed to bury. Not servant, not scandal, not tolerated danger. Queen. Chapter 13. Peace, when it came, arrived in a form the court did not expect. Not softness, correction. House Valadorn fractured under inquiry. 2 border alphas offered apologies written so carefully they almost sounded like prayers. The capital began speaking of Leora not as the woman who had hidden what she was, but as the woman who had survived a court vicious enough to expose her and then sat on its throne anyway. That mattered less than something else. Kaelin stopped making her prove his choice. No more public theatre for the sake of reassurance. No more strategic wounds dressed later as necessity. No more letting the room decide first and answering second. He still burned. Gods, he still burned. Possessive, relentless, difficult, too aware of where she was in every room. But now his pursuit had lost the old arrogance. It carried cost, memory, earned caution. That mattered most. Some nights they fought, properly, about policy, about law, about the old palace habits he did not even notice were built to diminish women before rank, about how many of Marrow's statutes still sat quietly in the books poisoning future rooms, about how he looked at her in court as if he were one bad day from dragging the whole assembly onto his sword. Those were good nights. Not because they were easy, because they were honest. The bond between them deepened in strange, unfinished ways, never priest-blessed, never properly named, but steady now, a line of heat and instinct and emotion crossing distance when needed, not a leash, not ownership, a chosen vulnerability. They learned its edges together, slowly, dangerously, on her terms more often than his. Especially that, the first time she marked him, it happened not in a bed, but in a council room after 3 hours of listening to 2 old alphas debate whether hybrid succession should be formally recognized. Kaelin had kept too calm for too long. She could feel it in the bond, tight and razor-thin. When the second alpha implied that no child of hers should inherit if her bloodline could not be named cleanly, Kaelin rose with murder in his body. Leora caught his wrist. He stopped. The room watched. Then she stepped in front of him and said, "Careful. You make them feel important when you threaten them yourself." That humiliated the old men more elegantly than violence would have. When the chamber finally cleared, Kaelin shut the doors and looked at her like surviving her in public had become its own religion. "You enjoy that," he said. "I enjoy making your enemies realize I can do the damage myself." His mouth moved, not enough to be called a smile. He came close. "You also enjoy ordering me to stay still. Yes, cruel. You live." Kaelin touched her jaw with 2 fingers, waited for permission in the pause, then bent and put his mouth to the side of her throat. Her pulse jumped. He felt that and made a sound under his breath that went through the bond like flame. Then he bit down. Not enough to wound deeply, enough to mark. Heat flooded her so violently she grabbed his shoulder to stay upright. Kaelin lifted his head and looked at the flushed line he'd left at her throat with a kind of satisfaction that should have been illegal in kings. Leora stared at him. "You did that in the council room?" "I've wanted to do it in the council room for months." She actually laughed, then kissed him hard enough to make him forget every law in the kingdom for the next few minutes. That mattered too. Not because desire fixed anything, because after all the humiliation, blood, public shame and reversal, they had finally reached something more dangerous than obsession. Ease. Not safe ease, earned ease. The kind that comes only after 2 people have seen the worst ways the world might use them against each other, and chosen not to let it win. On the first anniversary of the Great Hall, Kaelin brought her there alone after midnight. No torches burned, except the ones he lit himself. The room stood quiet around them, polished and empty, all violence gone from the stone except what memory insisted on keeping. Leora stopped in the exact place the guards had forced the vial to her mouth. Kaelin went still behind her. For a long moment neither spoke. Then he said, "I hate this room." She looked around. "No, you hate who you were in it." That struck true. He did not deny it. Kaelin crossed the floor and stopped before her. "I can have it torn down." Leora considered that, then shook her head. "No." His eyes searched hers. She smiled without softness. "I prefer it standing." Understanding moved across his face slowly and completely. "Good. Let the room remain. Let the court remain. Let every polished inch of marble remember who it once tried to shame." Kaelin reached for her. This time, no hesitation. This time, no question. Because the asking had long ago become part of the way he touched her, not a separate thing that needed staging. Leora stepped into him before his hand reached her face. That mattered too. He laughed once, low and disbelieving, and wrapped his arms around her, as if some part of him still expected she might vanish if he held too loosely. "I nearly lost you in this room," he murmured into her hair. "You did lose me in this room," she said. He shut his eyes. There was no flinching from it now. Only memory and the shape of the repair made afterward. "And you made me earn the return. I'm still making you." His mouth brushed her temple. "Good." She leaned back enough to look at him. At the man who had once chosen the wrong protection. At the king who had knelt. At the wolf who had learned restraint only after obsession. At the love that had hurt her publicly and then spent itself proving it could choose more cleanly. "You know," she said, "the court still fears me." Kaelin's eyes darkened. "As they should." Leora smiled then, sharp, satisfied, entirely herself. "No," she said. "They fear what happens to them if they forget I am loved." The bond between them flared warm and steady. Kaelin looked at her like the sentence itself might count as a vow. Then he kissed her in the center of the old wound, right there on the marble, where they had once forced her open and called it justice. When he drew back, his voice was rough. "You were never easy to shame." Leora lifted a brow. "I was—" "No." His thumb touched the line of her mouth. "You were easy to wound. That is not the same thing." The truth of it settled through her like fire finding its proper shape. Outside, the winter bells began to ring the midnight hour. Inside, the great hall stood silent and watching. The room had seen her kneel. The room had seen her exposed. The room had seen him fail. The room had seen him choose. Now it saw the last best thing. Not a monster accepted. Not a king redeemed. A woman once dragged into shame, standing in the center of that old violence with a crown on her head, a kingdom under her hand, and the man who had almost lost her looking at her like survival itself had finally learned where to kneel. And this time, when the hall held its breath around them, it was not waiting for her to break. It was waiting for her to be obeyed.